Buzzword is one. I think
Hmm.
distribution mechanism is really the right answer. That's all it is.
Right.
It's
Right.
not D2C is important. It always has been,
Hmm.
it always will be, but it's not an identity. Like it got to the point where we were talking about brands that they were D2C brands. Like here you're telling me very
Yeah.
rightly so that Nike and Eagle are not cut from the same cloth. And yet companies like Casper and Third Love and I don't know, think of some crazy that like probably Ember Mug, right? Like companies that
Yeah.
have nothing to do with each other, but because they sold direct, we're all of a
Right.
sudden the same.
Mhm.
Like, I'm sorry, Abercrombie and Eagle and Nike are dramatically closer to each other than companies that just happen to sell via a website, but that's not how they
Yeah.
became looked. It was became your identity. And I think that was the problem. And so what I would say is D2C is necessary, right? Necessary could be a word as well. It's not sufficient, right? It's not who you are. It's a way to get product to your consumer. But we need to remember is since the beginning of time, or at least since Disney's Aladdin and that Julianne Fry's dish in the bazaar, like people make, there's an entity that makes content or product. There's an entity that absorbs and uses content or product, and then there's a distribution channel in between. And so there's a role for everything. But you got to figure out what your role is, right? Are you the creator? Are you the consumer? Or are you the distributor? And that's fine, right? But if you're the distributor, you're distributing product. Like it's just thinking about what it is. And I think the highest level, because I think this was like the easiest way I synthesized that report I referenced, the D2C's knowledge cracked up to be. I think we got enamored by the idea that if I eliminate the middle person, I make more money.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
Which was this? Yeah.
I think what we
That was the
did,
same issue we saw going back in the late 90s, early 2000s. The same issue, right?
and I think what people didn't realize, because again, it was easy not to, was you don't eliminate the middle
You
person.
don't.
You just become them. And
Yeah.
by
You
the
have to take
way,
on the costs.
exactly. And by the way, and you know this obviously dramatically better than I do, Target has a low gross margin. Macy's has a low gross margin. Like Dick's Sporting Goods, low gross margin. The distributor doesn't make much money. They play the volume game. And
Hmm.
so if they have a low gross margin, the corollary to that is their COGS, their cost of goods are high. Well, their cost of goods, bear with me here, their cost of goods are the vendor's profits.
Right.
And so not only do you become the distributor, you become the middle person
Yep.
doesn't make much money against you. They're a very economically efficient means of distribution. Let them do their job.
Hmm.
And I think that's the part that I think people missed. And it just became so easy to go down that rabbit hole. And I think thankfully I don't have to fight that fight anymore. So it's not to say like I became known as like this anti D2C guy. I'm not anti D2C. I'm anti wholesale. And I think
Yeah.
that's the point of internalize what the right level of distribution, but that's not who you are. That's just how you play out what you want to be.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with what you just said there, and that was partly why I railed on the brandless concept for so long, the whole brand tax, where they were forgetting that all those costs still have to be accrued by somebody, and it's going to be you yourself as the brand or the retailer that you're trying to put this into play.